Don't touch my car. The billionaire's voice cut through the smoke, sharp with fear and disdain. His $4.2 million hypercar, an untouchable symbol of status, was choking, gasping for life in the middle of an industrial street. And the man stepping forward to save it? A homeless black man most people would have crossed the street to avoid. Matthew, tech mogul and self-proclaimed genius of innovation, had spent years believing he could read talent at a glance. But in the next 60 seconds, every assumption he held about brilliance, worth, and humanity was about to collapse. The crowd swelled around the crippled machine, its futuristic engine, the so-called quantum thrust cooling system. A piece of technology so secret even insiders whispered about it. Let out a final metallic groan. Wright's frantic calls to his engineers went unanswered. Then from the edge of the crowd, a calm voice rose above the chaos. "Sir, your cooling system has a microfracture in the secondary loop. I can fix it." Matthew froze, his finger hovering over the number for security. How could this ragged stranger possibly know about technology buried under patents and NDAs? And why, if he was that brilliant, was he living on the streets? Kevin hadn't always been invisible. 3 years ago, he was celebrated as the engineer who revolutionized aerospace cooling systems, innovations that quite literally saved lives. He was the man corporations fought to hire. The MIT graduate with 3 degrees and 7 patents that generated millions for companies who later pretended he never existed. Now, he slept under the stars, his body unshielded from the cold, his mind imprisoned by the bias of others. Each dawn, Kevin folded his tarp with military precision. Habits of discipline he carried from the world of laboratories and deadlines into the world of survival. A public restroom became his sink. A library card became his lifeline. Knowledge, he told himself, was the one thing they could never strip from him. That morning, he had already noticed something unusual. He knew the hum of the Quantum Apex's engine the way a pianist knows a chord out of tune. He helped design its predecessor back when Aerotech still welcomed his genius. The irregular vibration told him exactly what was happening. A fracture spreading like a hairline crack in glass, invisible to all but someone who had once lived inside the blueprints. Years ago, he'd warned executives of this flaw. They waved him off. Deadlines mattered more than precision. Profit mattered more than listening to a black engineer who didn't fit their culture. Now, their negligence had finally caught up with them. Kevin wasn't reckless as he stepped forward. He had learned the hard way that help offered by a man who looked like him, dark-skinned, unshaven, clothes threadbare, was more often met with suspicion than gratitude. More often with a call to police than a handshake. And he saw it, flickering in Matthew's eyes. Not recognition of his mind, not respect for his past, but fear. Fear of the man before him, not the genius inside him. Kevin steadied himself anyway, because what stood before him, engulfed in smoke and pride, was not just a machine about to die, but an entire system that had failed to recognize its own hidden brilliance. Kevin knew that look, the quick flicker of judgment, the hand tightening on a phone, the silent calculation of whether to call security. He'd lived under that gaze for 3 years. What Matthew could never have guessed was that Kevin once stood on the very stages where Matthew delivered his keynotes. Their paths had nearly crossed half a decade ago, before false accusations shattered Kevin's career, long before the truth emerged, too late to restore his reputation. In Silicon Valley, forgiveness is fleeting. Scandal lasts forever. Now Kevin watched the smoke rising from the hypercar's engine like a doctor studying an X-ray. The shade, the density, the rhythm of its hiss, all of it spoke to him. He didn't need a lab, just his knowledge and a steady hand. He could fix this. Part pride, part instinct, part defiance against a world that had cast him aside. Kevin stepped forward. Because even after all the betrayal, he was still, at his core, a problem solver. Matthew slammed his phone shut, the call dead, his patience thinner than the smoke wafting into the air. Around him, the crowd swelled. Eyes, whispers, and cell phone cameras aimed squarely at his humiliation. The Quantum Apex, one of only 17 in existence, was failing him spectacularly. 3 hours until a high-stakes investor pitch, 2 miles from the nearest certified service center, and no signal strong enough to summon help. And now, here was a homeless man offering salvation he hadn't asked for. "Step back from the vehicle," Matthew barked, not even granting him the courtesy of eye contact. His voice carried the command of someone accustomed to immediate obedience. The crowd leaned in. Matthew, tech wonderkind, billionaire founder of Nexus Innovations, stranded, powerless, his fortune trapped in a smoking status symbol. Twitter gold. But Kevin didn't retreat. He kept his voice steady, professional, careful. "Sir, that specific model has a flaw in the cooling system. Secondary loop fracture. I can help you." Matthew's head snapped around. His eyes scanned Kevin from head to toe. The patched jacket, the beard, the grocery bag carrying all he owned. In that instant, Kevin was dismissed, judged, written off. "How would you know anything about this car?" Matthew demanded, the question dripping with skepticism. Kevin met his gaze without flinching. "Because I helped design the prototype cooling system it's based on." For a moment, silence. Then a short, cutting laugh escaped Matthew's lips, sharp and incredulous, the sound of privilege mocking impossibility. A few in the crowd chuckled nervously, following the billionaire's lead. "Right," Matthew sneered. "And I teach rocket science on weekends at the community college." He turned back to his phone, his body language dismissing Kevin as thoroughly as his words. Kevin didn't move. "The fracture is leaking coolant into the tertiary chamber," he said evenly. "That's why your exhaust is coming out that specific shade of blue-gray. If it continues, you'll have catastrophic engine failure and—" He paused, eyes narrowing with the precision of a surgeon. "About 47 minutes. Matthew froze. His own dashboard display had flashed a warning just minutes earlier. 45 minutes until irreversible damage. His head snapped up, suspicion hardening into paranoia. "How did you—" he began, then cut himself off. His eyes narrowed. "Did someone put you up to this? Is this a stunt?" A sleek black SUV rolled up, tires crunching against the asphalt. Two men in dark suits stepped out, private security from the nearby tech campus, summoned by Matthew's earlier call. "Is there a problem, Mr. Wright?" the taller one asked, his eyes locking on Kevin with trained suspicion. Matthew didn't hesitate. His voice was clipped, cold, dismissive. "This gentleman was just leaving." But Kevin's words spilled out before he could be silenced. "The Quantum Apex runs on a modified Aerotech cooling system. It has a flaw that was flagged during prototype testing but buried under production pressure. I know because I wrote memo XT447, the one that detailed the exact weakness your car is suffering from right now." Matthew's face flickered, just for a second. XT447. A ghost from his company's archives, a classified document never released outside boardrooms. How could this man know it existed, unless he had been there? "Mr. Wright, we should secure the area," the guard interrupted sharply. "Your vehicle contains proprietary tech. This man is a risk." Kevin didn't flinch. "You've got 45 minutes before that engine is ruined forever. The service center can't help you. They don't have the parts, and towing it will make the damage worse. You're running out of time." The guards stepped closer, their voices firm, their bodies rigid walls of authority. "Sir, move along. Final warning." Matthew raised a hand, halting them. His instincts warred inside him. Ego screaming to dismiss this stranger, logic whispering that he might hold the only solution. "You mentioned memo XT407, he said slowly. "How do you know about that?" Kevin looked him straight in the eye. Calm. Certain. "Because I wrote it. 5 years ago, when I was a consulting engineer at Aerotech. My name is Kevin." Recognition sparked in Matthew's memory. The name? The controversy? The headlines that once circulated painting Kevin as brilliant but troubled. Accusations. Scandal. Disappearance. But before Matthew could connect the dots, the guard cut in again, pressing forward. "Step away, Mr. Johnson." Matthew checked his watch. Roadside assistance? 2 hours. Investor meeting? 3. Time left before total engine failure. Less than 40 minutes. The smoke from the car thickened, curling into the sky like a clock ticking down. "What would you need to fix it?" Matthew asked at last, his tone edged with reluctant respect. Basic tools, Kevin said. Most are in your emergency kit. 20 minutes. That's all I need. The guards stiffened, their training at odds with the billionaire's wavering resolve. Mr. Wright, we strongly advise against— Check his ID first, Matthew snapped. Kevin complied without argument, handing over his only identification, a shelter card. When the guards returned, their report was bleak. No permanent address, no employment records for 3 years, an incident at his last job. The shelter confirms he stays there occasionally. Matthew's face hardened. The risk seemed too great, the optics too messy. I'm sorry for the misunderstanding, he said flatly. He wasn't sorry at all. My team will handle this. Kevin stood still, his shoulders squared but his chance slipping away. He'd been dismissed before. Doors slammed, resumes ignored, interviews cut short. This moment felt no different. But then Matthew's phone rang. He answered instantly, hope flashing. It dimmed just as quickly. 2 hours? That's not acceptable. The system's telling me I have less than 40 minutes. His voice rose, his face pale with frustration. I don't care if it's proprietary. That's why I paid for it. There has to be someone closer. The crowd around them buzzed louder, whispers blending into a digital chorus of phone cameras and murmured commentary. The billionaire's aura of control was unraveling in public, piece by piece. Kevin remained where he was, calm, steady, patient. He didn't gloat, he didn't press. He simply waited, the embodiment of quiet truth, while Matthew's fortress of options crumbled into smoke. Matthew snapped his phone shut, his jaw tight. Useless, he muttered under his breath. His eyes flicked from the clock on his wrist to the smoke curling out of the hypercar's engine bay like a countdown. The 2 security guards exchanged wary glances. Sir, the taller one said, if there's a risk of fire, we should clear the area. There won't be a fire, Kevin said evenly, his voice calm against the chaos. That smoke is coolant vaporizing against the thermal shielding. The danger isn't flames, it's microscopic damage to the thrust bearings. Replace those and you're out $870,000. If they fail completely, your car becomes a sculpture. 3 heads snapped toward him at once. Matthew's eyes narrowed. How the hell do you know the exact replacement cost? Kevin didn't blink. Because I calculated the manufacturing specs myself. The bearings use a proprietary alloy blend only 2 facilities in the world can fabricate. Lead time, 11 weeks. The number, the detail, the precision, it all landed like a stone in Matthew's chest. Information this specific wasn't public, not even close. Sir, we should call the police, one guard suggested, his voice tense. This man is harassing you. Matthew waved him off, his gaze fixed on Kevin with something new. A grudging, unsettling curiosity. You said your name was Kevin. Yes. And you claim you worked at Aerotech. I didn't just work there, Kevin replied, his tone steady, his words surgical. I led the thermodynamics team that built the original cooling system your car's engine is based on. Patent number AT5729QX. Registered 5 years ago, the Quantum Apex uses a modified version of that architecture. Matthew's expression shifted it just slightly. That patent number, he knew it. He'd seen it buried in technical briefs. This wasn't a lucky guess. He stepped closer, lowering his voice. If you are who you say you are, then why are you— He faltered, gesturing vaguely at Kevin's worn jacket, his unshaven face, the plastic bag of belongings at his feet. Homeless, Kevin said for him. False accusations, corporate politics, and racial bias that made it easy for the world to believe the worst about me. But right now, none of that matters. What matters is you have 35 minutes before this engine destroys itself, and I can fix it. Matthew checked his watch again, then scanned the crowd. It had tripled in size. A local tech blogger had arrived, camera raised, already streaming the billionaire's humiliation to the world. His investor meeting, his polished image of control, his empire, all of it was slipping further away with every wisp of blue-gray smoke. What exactly would you do? He asked at last, his voice edged with reluctant respect. Kevin answered with the precision of an engineer. Access the secondary loop, vent the contaminated coolant, seal the fracture, replenish the system. With your emergency kit and a few things from that store across the street, I can finish in under 20 minutes. Matthew shook his head, incredulous. Impossible. The manufacturer's engineers insist it requires specialized equipment in a sealed facility. They overcomplicate it, Kevin countered, his tone firm. The issue isn't exotic, it's fluid dynamics. The coolant is proprietary, yes, but the workaround is straightforward. Their caution protects liability. My method will save your car. The shorter guard, who had been silent until now, spoke up. Sir, I think I know this man. He teaches science at the West Side Shelter. Volunteers with kids. They say he's brilliant. Kevin inclined his head, quietly acknowledging the truth. Matthew turned sharply to the guard. And you've seen him? Yes, the coordinator calls him a genius, the guard admitted. I didn't realize who he was until just now. Matthew began to pace, torn between pride and desperation. The crowd pressed closer. The diagnostic screen blinked an unforgiving truth. 31 minutes until catastrophic failure. His empire, his investors, his reputation, everything balanced on the choice before him. Trust the man society had thrown away, or watch millions of dollars turn to smoke. Show me, Matthew finally said, his voice clipped but laced with urgency. Not the repair, just explain what's happening and how you'd fix it. Kevin gave a single nod. He stepped toward the hypercar, careful not to touch it. Instead, he gestured through the vents, his voice steady, precise, every word carrying authority. The quantum thrust system uses 3 layers of cooling: primary, secondary, tertiary. The secondary loop holds a specialized nanocoolant that keeps the thrust bearings stable under quantum load. The fracture is here. He pointed with surgical accuracy, which is allowing coolant to leak into the tertiary chamber. That's why you're seeing vapor on the shielding. That smoke isn't random. It's a signature. Matthew's skepticism shifted into something closer to awe as Kevin described the exact alloys, the chemical tolerances, the structural layout, details buried deep in proprietary blueprints. The crowd leaned in, sensing they were witnessing something extraordinary. The factory protocol requires full disassembly, Kevin continued. They assume worst-case contamination, but this pattern is localized. With precision, we can isolate the breach, seal it with thermal bond, and restore functionality without tearing the system apart. Matthew's tech background was strong enough to know. Kevin wasn't bluffing. He was speaking the language of a master. Where would you even get thermal bond sealant right now? Matthew asked, almost challengingly. For the first time that day, Kevin allowed himself a faint smile. Your emergency kit contains a basic sealant. Add to that the graphite from Stettler Mars Lumograph 8B pencils. You can buy them in that store across the street, and we can engineer a substitute. It will hold until you get a permanent repair. Matthew blinked, incredulous. You're telling me you can fix my $4.2 million hypercar with pencil lead? Not just any graphite, Kevin corrected. The density, the particle distribution, it's ideal for this application. Combined with your sealant, applied under precise conditions, it'll work. Engineering is not about having everything you want, it's about solving problems with what you have. The 2 guards, once bristling with suspicion, now watched with something closer to respect. Even the crowd had quieted, as if sensing the gravity of the decision about to be made. Matthew checked the dashboard. 28 minutes until catastrophic failure. His investors were already en route, expecting to be dazzled by a flawless presentation. The manufacturer's team was hours away. There were no more calls to make. If you damage my car, Matthew began. Kevin cut him off, calm as ever. It's already damaged. The question isn't whether it breaks. It's whether you'll let me stop it before it's too late. For a moment, Matthew hesitated, pride still clashing with reality. Then he exhaled, long and sharp, and reached for the hood release. With a hiss of compressed air, the carbon fiber hood lifted, revealing the labyrinth of technology beneath. A glimpse few had ever seen. The crowd gasped collectively, cameras rising like a forest of eyes. Kevin stepped forward with the composure of a surgeon entering an operating room. I'll need your emergency kit, he said, all business now. Matthew retrieved a sleek carbon case from the trunk and handed it over. Kevin opened it, scanning the contents with quick, expert eyes. This will do. Send one of your men for the pencils I mentioned. Stettler Mars Lumograph 8B. Nothing else will work. The shorter guard glanced at Matthew. He gave a terse nod. Go, quickly. As the guard sprinted toward the store, Kevin began laying out the tools, each movement precise, deliberate, no wasted motion. Years of mastery lived in his hands, even if society had stripped him of everything else. The hypercar ticked softly as the engine cooled, like a dying heartbeat, and all eyes turned to the man the world had forgotten, waiting to see if he could bring it back to life. Matthew couldn't look away. The ragged man he had almost dismissed as a nuisance now moved with the calm authority of a surgeon in an operating room. His hands were steady, his eyes sharp. The fracture should be visible once I remove this panel, Kevin said, selecting a tool from the emergency kit. The coolant itself is transparent, but it leaves a residue. That's how we'll trace the leak. Matthew leaned closer, phone flashlight in hand. He found himself nodding, following Kevin's explanation like a student at the elbow of a master. How long did you say you worked at Aerotech? 3 years as lead thermal engineer, 2 more as a consultant. Kevin replied without looking up. His voice never wavered, though his words carried weight. Until the incident ended my career. Matthew frowned. What incident? A prototype failure, Kevin said simply, easing the panel loose. Management ignored safety warnings. When the system failed, they needed someone to blame. My team, my name. The truth came out later, but by then my career was ashes. A faint hiss escaped as the cover slid free. Vapor curled into the night air. Kevin pointed, his voice calm, almost clinical. Exactly where I predicted. The stress junction between the secondary and tertiary systems. One hairline fracture causing all this chaos. Matthew stared at the crack in disbelief. That tiny line? The system operates under pressure most people can't imagine, Kevin said. A flaw measured in microns can destroy millions of dollars of engineering. Before Matthew could reply, a sharp voice cut through the crowd. What the hell is going on here? A tall man in a tailored suit pushed forward, flanked by 2 more guards. His badge gleamed. Tech Horizon Executive Security. Mr. Wright, the man said, his tone clipped. We received reports of tampering with your vehicle. Our CEO sent me personally. Matthew straightened. Edwards, thank you. But the situation is under control. This man is helping me. Edwards' eyes swept over Kevin with disdain. His words dripped with contempt. Our protocols forbid unauthorized access to proprietary systems. Especially... He didn't finish, but his meaning was clear. Matthew stiffened. He knows what he's doing. But even as he spoke, his conviction faltered under the weight of protocol, reputation, risk. With respect, sir, Edwards pressed, lowering his voice. This car contains technology worth millions. We can't let just anyone touch it. I'm not just anyone, Kevin interjected quietly, his hand still working with precision. And in 18 minutes, this engine will be ruined. Edwards stepped forward, his hand tightening around Kevin's arm. Sir, I need you to back away now. At that moment, the shorter security guard returned, a small package of pencils in hand, the final piece Kevin needed. But he froze at the sight of Edwards bearing down on Kevin, unsure whether to deliver it or retreat. Edwards, please, Matthew tried, but the security chief cut him off with a sharp edge of authority. Mr. Wright, we've had 3 espionage attempts this quarter alone. How do you know this man isn't another plant? How do you know he hasn't been waiting for this exact opportunity? The seed of doubt Matthew had buried began to sprout again, fed by fear, reputation, and the dozens of phones capturing every second. Investors. Security protocols. Liability? His empire teetered in the balance. I think perhaps we should wait for the manufacturer's team, Matthew said slowly, his earlier resolve draining away. Kevin set the tools down with deliberate calm. He stood tall, eyes level, voice steady. Mr. Wright, I understand your hesitation, but you must understand this. He pointed into the exposed chamber of the hypercar. That is the quantum stabilization unit. In 14 minutes, the leaking coolant will reach critical temperature. When it does, the cascade failure won't just disable your car, it will destroy it completely. The crowd hushed, as if the whole street held its breath. Cameras zoomed in. The billionaire stood torn between fear and pride, and the man society had cast aside held the only truth that mattered. The clock ticked. 14 minutes. When the cascade hits, you won't just need new bearings, Kevin said evenly. You'll need a new engine core, 3 months of work, minimum. Matthew's jaw tightened. He was torn between logic and fear, between pride and desperation. Edwards pressed his advantage. Mr. Wright, we've already called the police. This man has no credentials, no authorization. For all we know, he's causing more damage. Kevin straightened, his dignity intact despite the sting. At least I've identified the problem. Perhaps that will help your manufacturer's team when they arrive. He stepped back, surrendering the fight, his silence louder than protest. Just then, the guard clutching the pencil package finally approached Matthew, speaking low. Sir, I called the shelter while I was out. They confirmed he teaches engineering there. The coordinator says he's some kind of genius. MIT professor, maybe. Something big. Before Matthew could respond, the car itself interrupted. Its diagnostic system chimed. Warning. 12 minutes to critical system failure. The crowd gasped. Phones rose higher. The tension was suffocating. Kevin made one last gamble. His voice was calm, steady, unshakable. Mr. Wright, make one call. Just one. Call Dr. Melissa at Space Tech Industries. Tell her Kevin is here. The name hit the air like a spark. Even Matthew blinked in surprise. Dr. Melissa, chief engineer at Space Tech? Kevin nodded once. She'll confirm everything I've told you. Matthew hesitated only a heartbeat before pulling out his phone. His thumb scrolled through contacts, proof of his own place in the tech elite. When the call connected, his tone was careful. Dr. Chen, Matthew here. I apologize for the intrusion, but I have a situation. There's a man here who claims to know you. Claims his name is Kevin. Matthew's expression shifted almost instantly. His eyes widened as he listened, the crowd holding its breath. Seconds stretched into an eternity. Yes, he's here, Matthew said at last. Would you mind if I put you on speaker? He tapped a button. A voice, crisp and professional, filled the air. Kevin? Kevin, is that really you? A small smile tugged at Kevin's lips. Hello, Melissa. It's been a while. 3 years, 4 months, and about 22 days. God. Her voice cracked with disbelief. You vanished. We looked for you. I looked for you. It's a long story, Kevin replied softly. Her tone sharpened. Matthew, do you understand who you're standing next to? Kevin is the most brilliant thermal engineer I've ever worked with. His cooling designs revolutionized our spacecraft. We still use his patents in every single launch. He is... She caught her breath. Irreplaceable. Matthew's mouth fell slightly open. His mind reeled. He claims he can fix my quantum apex, he managed, voice low. Says there's a microfracture in the secondary loop. If Kevin says it, Dr. Chen replied without hesitation, then it's true. In fact, your car's system is built on his designs. Aerotech licensed his patents after he left. If he says he can fix it, let him. Edwards shifted uncomfortably, his authority wilting. The guard who had brought the pencils now stood closer to Kevin, his posture no longer protective of Matthew but of the man everyone had nearly cast aside. Matthew swallowed hard, the weight of the revelation pressing down on him. Dr. Chen, the thing is... He faltered, searching for words. Kevin supplied them for him, his voice calm, unflinching. He means I'm homeless. A stunned silence fell across the phone line. Then, that's not possible, Dr. Chen said, her voice breaking. You had offers from every major company. I sent you one myself. We all did. Kevin exhaled, his eyes on the smoking machine. Like I said, it's a long story. But right now, Mr. Wright's car has 9 minutes before catastrophic failure. If your word carries any weight, Melissa, give me permission to finish this. As if on cue, the car's voice chimed again. mechanical and merciless. Warning: 9 minutes to critical system failure. The crowd fell silent. The billionaire, the guards, the cameras, every soul on that street waited for Matthew's decision. The clock was running out. Matthew! Dr. Chen's voice came sharp and unyielding through the speaker. Let Kevin fix your car. He's not only capable, he's the single most qualified person alive to do it. I trust him with spacecraft worth billions. Trust him with your car. Matthew turned, staring at Kevin as though seeing him for the first time. I don't understand. If you're who she says you are, how did you end up like this? Kevin didn't flinch. His reply was quiet, steady but heavy with truth. False accusations, racial profiling, a system that condemns faster than it forgives. Once you fall through the cracks, no address, no credit, no phone, you stop existing in their world. And once you're invisible, it's almost impossible to climb back out. But he nodded toward the car, smoke still curling upward. We can discuss America's inequities after I save your engine. Matthew swallowed, properly chastened. Edwards, stand down. He glanced at the phone. Dr. Chen, thank you. Kevin, her voice cut in quickly. When this is over, call me, I mean it. There are positions waiting for you, there always have been. Kevin's eyes softened, though his tone remained reserved. I'll consider it, Melissa. Goodbye. Matthew ended the call and turned. I owe you an apology. Kevin shook his head. You owe me the chance to finish what I started. And those pencils your guard is holding. The guard hurried forward, offering the pack. Kevin selected one with the precision of a surgeon. Perfect. As Kevin resumed his work, the energy in the crowd shifted. What had begun as voyeuristic curiosity now carried something else. Respect. Even Edwards and his men hung back, their suspicion replaced by reluctant awe. Matthew hovered nearby, his skepticism finally giving way to genuine curiosity. How does this work? You're using pencils? The sealant in your kit is meant for temporary repairs to the primary loop, Kevin explained, his hands moving steadily as he dismantled the casing. But this graphite, at exactly this density, when infused into the compound, creates a molecular bond strong enough to hold under extreme quantum pressure. Matthew's brow furrowed. You invented this method? Kevin allowed himself a faint smile. Necessity is the mother of invention. When you've worked in experimental conditions with nothing but scraps, you learn how to improvise. The car's system chimed again, mechanical and merciless. Warning. 6 minutes to critical system failure. The crowd stiffened, phones trembling in their hands. Kevin looked up at Matthew. I need absolute silence and complete focus. One mistake, and it's over. Matthew stepped back, gesturing for everyone to give him space. The sidewalk hushed into reverent silence. Kevin bent over the exposed engine like a surgeon in an improvised theater, tools spread neatly beside him. On Matthew's phone, a patent filing glowed on the screen. Kevin, principal inventor. Proof undeniable. The minutes bled away. 5, 4, 3. Matthew checked his watch compulsively, his stomach twisting with every tick. The smoke thinned, but the red warning still blazed across the diagnostics. I need more light, Kevin murmured, not looking up. Immediately, 3 bystanders raised their phones, flashlights blazing into the engine bay. The light caught Kevin's focused face, his hands steady, his movements exact. Almost there, he whispered. Fracture sealed. Now to vent the contaminated coolant and restore system pressure. The street was so quiet, it seemed the entire city was holding its breath. Kevin reached deeper into the labyrinth of machinery, his hands moving with the certainty of a man who had once drawn these blueprints. With practiced precision, he twisted a valve, and a thin, shimmering stream of fluid began draining into a container, improvised from the hypercar's own emergency kit. The liquid caught the light like molten silver. Is that the nanocoolant? Matthew asked, his anxiety giving way to fascination. Yes, Kevin said matter-of-factly. Roughly $20,000 worth. We're salvaging about 60%. Better than I expected. Matthew's brow furrowed. You even know the cost? I helped develop it, Kevin replied, steady as ever. The process is expensive. Quantum stabilization alloys aren't cheap. Prices may have gone up since I was last in the industry. The car's voice chimed again, cold and merciless. Warning. 2 minutes to critical system failure. Matthew's pulse quickened. The crowd tensed, but Kevin didn't flinch. His movement stayed deliberate, calm, precise. He refilled the loop with reserve coolant from the kit. Standard formula, he explained. Not designed for this system, but it'll stabilize function. Keep engine output under 70% until you can replace with the specialized coolant. Matthew watched in silence, struck by how effortlessly Kevin navigated a system that had baffled his own engineers. The dashboard flashed again, 30 seconds remaining. Kevin tightened the panel with a final twist, sealing his improvised repair. He exhaled once, then gave the order. Start the engine. Matthew froze. Are you certain? If this fails? Start the engine, Kevin repeated, quiet but commanding. Matthew pressed the ignition. For a heartbeat, silence. Then, with a rising whine that deepened into a smooth, resonant purr, the quantum apex roared back to life. No smoke. No warning alarms. The diagnostic screen flickered before stabilizing. System functional. Performance limited to 70%. Service required. For a moment, the world was still. Then the crowd erupted in cheers, applause echoing against the concrete walls of the district. Dozens of phones caught the moment. The billionaire's car reborn under the hands of the man the world had tried to erase. Matthew stared at the display, muttering, Impossible. The manufacturer swore this couldn't be repaired outside the lab. They overcomplicate it to protect their monopoly, Kevin said, wiping his hands with a rag from the kit. The science is simple. If you understand the fundamentals, you don't need their theatrics. Matthew turned, eyes wide, with newfound respect. How long will it hold? 3 weeks under normal use, Kevin replied. Plenty of time for a permanent fix. Just don't push it past 70%. Matthew nodded, then extended his hand. This time there was no arrogance in the gesture, only sincerity. Thank you, truly. Kevin clasped it firmly. You're welcome. It could have ended there, two men bridging a gap of worlds for one fleeting moment. But Matthew wasn't finished. His curiosity as an engineer and as a man whose worldview had just cracked burned too brightly. I need to understand what you just did, Matthew said. And your story. Come with me, at least to my office. Let me pay you properly. Kevin hesitated. I appreciate it, but I'm not sure. Please, Matthew interrupted. You didn't just save my car. You may have saved my reputation, my company. And after what Dr. Chen said, I have 1,000 questions. At that moment, Edwards stepped forward cautiously, his earlier authority now subdued. Mr. Wright, your investor meeting is in 90 minutes. We should leave soon if you plan to make it. Matthew's eyes lit up with sudden inspiration. He turned to Kevin. Then come with me. These investors are backing a new thermal regulation system for quantum computing. If you're willing, you should be in that room with me. The crowd, still buzzing, leaned closer. The man once invisible was now at the center of everything. And for the first time in years, Kevin stood on the edge of possibility. Your insights would be invaluable, Matthew pressed. Kevin shook his head slightly. I'm hardly dressed for an investor meeting. Matthew glanced at his watch, his eyes narrowing with calculation. We have time to fix that. He turned to Edwards. Call ahead to Bespoke on 5th. I want their best team ready in 30 minutes. Full professional attire. Kevin's size. Edwards blinked, visibly startled, but gave a sharp nod and stepped away to make the call. That's not necessary, Kevin protested. Matthew's reply was immediate. Consider it part of your payment, besides. A grin tugged at his mouth. I want to see the investors' faces when I tell them who fixed the unfixable quantum apex. For the first time all day, Kevin let himself smile. A real, unguarded smile. That might be worth seeing. Matthew's grin widened, but his tone shifted serious. I still don't understand. Someone with your background, your talent, how did it come to this? Kevin's smile faded. It's not a pleasant story. Then I need to hear it, Matthew said firmly. Then he leaned back, studying Kevin with sharp interest. But first, I have a proposition. A test. Kevin arched an eyebrow. Another one? I thought I just passed the ultimate test with your car. You did, Matthew admitted. But I'm not just interested in whether you can fix engines. I want to know if your insights can shape our future projects. Come with me to this investor meeting. Listen, if you can identify the flaws and improvements in our new thermal regulation system, I'll put you on contract immediately. Consulting, no red tape. And if I'm not interested, Matthew gave a shrug. Then I'll pay you fairly for saving my car and my reputation. But something tells me you'll be interested. What happened over the next 20 minutes defied every expectation. Inside the private dressing suite of Bespoke on Fifth Avenue, Kevin stepped out transformed. The charcoal suit fit like armor, sleek, commanding. His beard trimmed, his hair styled, he no longer resembled the man who had slept under tarps and washed in public restrooms. He stood tall, composed, every movement radiating quiet authority. Even the staff paused to stare, as if a hidden figure of history had walked back into the present. Matthew nodded, satisfied. Now you look the part of the brilliant engineer you are. Kevin adjusted his cuffs with precision. Appearances are deceptive. That's the point of this whole ordeal, isn't it? Matthew chuckled, conceding. Touché. But in 40 minutes, you'll have the chance to prove that substance still matters more than style. The ride to Nexus Innovations headquarters was brief, but for Kevin, every block felt like crossing a border between two worlds. Through the tinted windows, he saw neighborhoods he normally walked through unnoticed. Shelters, alleys, corners where survival came before dignity. Now he rode in a leather-lined SUV, flanked by men who had nearly forced him away hours earlier, but now watched him with an unfamiliar mixture of caution and respect. Matthew scrolled on his tablet. I had my assistant pull your background. His eyes flicked up. MIT, top of your class. 3 patents before graduation. Lead thermal engineer at Spacetech by 26. Consultant to Aerotech by 29. And then... His voice dropped. Nothing. You vanished 3 years ago. Kevin's gaze stayed on the window. The Aerotech incident. My assistant found the reports. Prototype failure, millions lost, and you were blamed. Kevin turned, voice quiet but unflinching. I was the scapegoat. The investigation eventually proved management overrode our safety protocols to hit a deadline. But by then, my name was destroyed. Matthew frowned. But surely other companies would have... Kevin cut him off with a rueful smile. When you're accused of losing millions, doors slam shut. Add racial profiling. A few rumors. Difficult personality. Not a team player. And suddenly no one takes your calls. Not even the ones who know you're brilliant. Matthew studied him carefully. That still doesn't explain 3 years of homelessness. No, Kevin agreed. His eyes finally left the window and locked on Matthew's. Depression, a drained savings account, and a system designed to bury you once you fall. No safety nets, no second chances. Once you're invisible, the world pretends you never existed. The car fell silent. For the first time, Matthew, the billionaire, the innovator, the man who had built empires, looked at Kevin not as a curiosity, not as a problem solver, but as a mirror held up to a society that chose who mattered and who did not. Do you know how impossible it is to get hired when you have no address, no phone, when you show up in worn clothes and can't even afford a haircut? Kevin's voice was calm, but each word carried a blade's edge of truth. The same credentials that impressed you earlier. When you're homeless, they get labeled as suspicious, fabricated. Genius becomes invisible when wrapped in poverty. Matthew shifted uncomfortably. For the first time, the billionaire looked not just chastened, but ashamed. I'm beginning to understand, he murmured. They arrived at the gleaming glass tower of Nexus Innovations, with 20 minutes to spare. As they stepped through the marble lobby, heads turned, not toward Matthew, the man employees saw every day, but toward the stranger at his side, who now carried himself with the presence of someone who belonged anywhere he chose to stand. "Kevin," Matthew said as an elegant woman in her 50s approached. "This is Sharon, our chief technology officer. Sharon, meet Kevin." Recognition flickered instantly in her eyes. "The Kevin from Space Tech?" Kevin inclined his head politely. "A lifetime ago, yes." Her expression softened into admiration. "Your work on quantum thermal regulation was revolutionary. We built our foundation on your designs." "That's why he's here," Matthew cut in. "He just saved my quantum apex with an improvised repair the manufacturer swore was impossible. I want his input on our thermal project." Sharon blinked, astonished. "You fixed a secondary loop failure. In the field? With what equipment?" "Pencil graphite and emergency sealant," Kevin replied evenly. For a moment, Sharon simply stared. Then she laughed, a delighted, disbelieving sound. "That's brilliant. The graphite nanoparticles would bind perfectly with the sealant's polymer. Elegant, simple, and obvious, yet somehow we never thought of it." "Sometimes," Kevin said softly, "when you're too close to a problem, you miss the simplest solutions." Matthew checked his watch. "The investors are waiting, shall we?" Inside the boardroom, 12 investors sat in tailored suits, murmurs dying as their eyes swept over the unexpected newcomer. Matthew stepped forward with the confidence of a showman. "Ladies and gentlemen, before we begin, allow me to introduce Kevin, the original architect of the quantum thrust cooling system that revolutionized aerospace. The man who, just hours ago, saved my car from destruction with nothing more than pencil graphite and ingenuity." A ripple passed through the room. Some leaned forward, intrigued. Others exchanged skeptical glances. The presentation began. Charts, graphs, projections filled the screen. Kevin listened in silence, jotting neat notes in the pad before him. Then Matthew gestured toward him. "Kevin, any thoughts?" Kevin spoke for exactly 7 minutes. In that span, he identified 3 critical design flaws, outlined elegant solutions for each, and sketched a modification that would increase system efficiency by 34% while reducing costs. His pen moved with the calm precision of a man who lived inside equations. When he finished, the room was silent. Then, like a dam breaking, questions poured in. Investors leaned forward, pens scratching, their skepticism transformed into fervor. 2 hours later, as the last of them filed out, each committing to larger funding rounds, Matthew closed the conference room door. His eyes shone with something that looked dangerously close to awe. "That," he said simply, "was extraordinary. You didn't just improve our design, you rewrote the future. Sharon says your changes will put us years ahead of the competition." Kevin only nodded. "Your team laid the foundation. I just built on it." Matthew sat across from him, hands folded. "As promised, I want you at Nexus. Consulting, full-time, name your price." Kevin studied him, his expression thoughtful. "I appreciate the offer, but I'm not sure a consulting role is what I need." "Then Director of Engineering," Matthew pressed. "Full creative control, whatever it takes." Kevin shook his head slightly. His voice was steady but carried the weight of years. "It's not about a title or control. It's about the bigger question. How many other brilliant minds are out there, overlooked, dismissed, forgotten, because of circumstances they couldn't escape?" The room fell quiet. For the first time, it wasn't about technology or money. It was about truth. And everyone knew it. Kevin leaned forward, his voice steady but charged with conviction. "At the shelter where I volunteer, I've met former medical researchers, software developers, even mechanical engineers. Brilliant minds. People with skills that could be saving lives or building the future, reduced to fighting the same barriers that kept me invisible. Housing, bias, stigma. Once you fall through the cracks, the system makes sure you stay there." Matthew's expression hardened into focus. "You're talking about something bigger than just hiring you." "I am." Kevin reached into his pocket and unfolded several creased, weathered pages. The paper was rough, edges worn, but covered with precise technical sketches. Blueprints drawn in ballpoint, equations scrawled between library dates and old headlines. These are patents I've been working on these past 3 years, on discarded newspapers, in the margins of library journals. Matthew took them carefully, his eyes widening as he read. These aren't just ideas. These are revolutionary, especially this one. Thermal regulation for quantum neural networks. Do you realize what you've built here? I had a lot of time to think, Kevin said simply. But imagine what could have been achieved if I'd had a lab, resources, a team. Now multiply that by all the other people out there, minds as sharp as mine, buried under prejudice, poverty, and systemic barriers. Matthew set the papers down as though they were sacred. What are you proposing? An innovation center, Kevin replied without hesitation. Not just for technology, but for talent recovery. A place that seeks out overlooked brilliance. That gives housing, resources, mentorship. That refuses to let genius go to waste just because it doesn't look like what society expects. You want me to fund this center? Matthew asked carefully. I want us to build it together, Kevin corrected. Your resources, your reach, my expertise, and my lived experience. These patents alone could launch it. But it's bigger than either of us. It's about creating a pipeline where talent doesn't vanish the moment life knocks it sideways. Matthew studied him, and for the first time, saw not a man who had saved his car, but a man who might save an entire industry from its own blind spots. Not revenge, not redemption for yourself alone. You want systemic change? Exactly. Kevin's eyes burned with passion. The tragedy isn't that I was homeless. It's that for 3 years, society wasted everything I had to give. And right now, there are thousands of others like me. Unseen, unvalued. That is the real loss. Matthew extended his hand. Kevin, I think you just found yourself a partner. The patents Kevin had sketched on scrap paper, worth more than the hypercar he'd just saved, were only the beginning. Their real value lay in what they represented: a transformation, a reckoning, a chance to rewrite who gets to be seen as brilliant. Brilliance doesn't always wear a suit. Sometimes it sleeps under bridges, hidden in plain sight, dismissed because of skin color, circumstance, or a gap in a resume. The true measure of our society isn't how we reward privilege. It's how we recognize and lift up genius wherever it hides. This isn't just Kevin's story. It's a mirror. It's about the potential you might be overlooking in others, or the brilliance the world has been taught to overlook in you. If this story touched something in you, join us at Beat Stories. Share your experiences in the comments. Subscribe to hear more voices the world tried to silence, voices that still carry fire, because the next world-changing idea might come from the person society told you to ignore. This isn't the end. It's the beginning of what happens when truth is given visibility and genius is given a chance.